Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to look into how to handle some basic international data roaming complaints. This holds true for both inbound and outbound roaming complaints. So upon completion of this course, you'll be able to troubleshoot inbound roaming complaints. You'll be able to troubleshoot outbound roaming complaints. And then I have introduced one session of how to test an APN resolution using various DNS service, which is also basically used in troubleshooting of a roaming complaint. So the first we're going to look into inbound roaming complaint handling. And as I discussed in the previous video as well, what is inbound roaming? Inbound roaming means that any roaming partner user is visiting your home country and is trying to use the data services using your network. So in this case, following nodes are going to be used of your operator. Your SDSN MME is going to be used. Your STP and gateway mesh in case of 2G, 3G, and your DA in case of 4G is going to be used. Your DNS is going to be used, and your BG router is going to be used. Right. So let's get into it. What are the basic things that you need to check if you get an inbound roaming roamer complaint? The first thing to check if the definitions are correct on your SDSN and MME as per IR 21. So for SDSN, like I mentioned in the previous video, the configuration part, you need to check whether the GT conversion rule exists. And need to check whether there is any IMSI restriction applied on this specific MNC MCC or not. In case both of these configurations are okay, they won't be any issue on your SDSN. If you're looking into 4G roaming, you need to check whether your in the segment definition is done. You need to check whether your diameter route towards RPMME is there. And need to check whether your in this segment to HSS routing is there. If all these configurations are correct and as per your IR 21, you don't need to worry about your configuration issue on your MME and SDSN. And if you find that any configuration is missing or is incorrect, so you can refer to the data roaming configuration in my previous video, where I have introduced how to perform all these configuration on SDSN and MME. Right. The second check that you need to do is on your PG router. And that again, you need to check whether your configuration is done as per IR 21. So from BG router perspective, the only thing that is provided is the ASN number. So you can log in into the BG router. You need to check in the configuration, download the configuration, see if the ASN number exists. And if ASN number does not exist, then obviously your data roaming is not going to work for that specific operator. So you need to add the definition of the ASN. And this also I mentioned in the previous video how to do the ASN configuration on BG router. Right. If all your basic configuration is fine, then the basic thing is to check the user session on your MME and SDSN. So these are the commands for Huawei platform. You can use the equivalent command to check the mobility management and the session management context. And if the session is created, then you can note down the APN and the write type and the that type with which the user is connected for further troubleshooting or for further communication with your roaming partner. Right. So if you see that a user context is maybe not created or maybe the context is created, so the next thing that you can do is check the smart care records. I believe majority of the operators have smart care or an equivalent node installed, so you can log in into smart care. And you have the option of querying the past records to see if there are any failures over there, any failure in attach or any failure in signaling, which you have identified, and that can be troubleshooted accordingly according to the cost code that is available in your smart care records. In the latest version of Smart Care, you have the customer complaint agent or the customer complaint handler, CECA and CCH tab. These are basically can be used for quick troubleshooting as well. And if you need to have an in-depth troubleshooting, then you can open a PS session query, and using the PS session query, you can identify on which specific interface you are observing the failures, and those can be done. This specific interface level records I'm going to introduce in the outbound roaming troubleshooting. So, generically, you can check the smart key record if you can find some issue on that specific in the specific user, and you can do the troubleshooting in a coordination with your roaming partner team. Right. If you don't understand anything, or if you do not have any records that are existing on smart care or something like that, then the main thing which you can do is perform a live tracing. You can engage the RP, and you can enable a trace on SDSN and MME, and then you can capture that trace, and you can analyze that trace to see that what sort of failure is being done, is being observed, which is preventing the user from attaching to the network and performing uh, roaming browsing. And in live tracing, usually I believe 99.9% issues are identified, provided the user is sending an attached request to your network. So you can easily identify that what sort of issue is being observed here. Right. So in inbound roaming, basically there isn't much which you can do apart from just check your definitions, which are correct, and check the record from SmartCare to identify from SmartCare or from live tracing to identify if there is any specific issue. Most of the issues are usually at the home network end, and usually we engage the RP and share the traces with them, or share the specific postcode with them, and then they can identify that what sort of issue is being observed by that user. Okay, so outbound roaming complaint handling. So what is outbound roaming? Outbound roaming means that any user of your network is roaming in some other country. Your network is roaming in some other country and is trying to use the data services. In this case, following home nodes will be used: SLR and HSS, your HTTP and gateway MSC for 2G, 3G, and your DEA for 4G. Your GN DNS is going to be used, your BG router is going to be used, and your GGSN and PGW is going to be used. So these are all the NEs which are going to be involved in troubleshooting for outbound roaming complaints. Right. So the first thing which you need to check is whether the user status on HLR and HSS. So you can check whether user is latched or not as per HSS, and if latched, to which operator. So you can go to your HLR, you can query the MS as an engine, check the VLR number, GT, and SDSN. If your user is successfully latched, your HLR, if you remember in your update location request, there are two flows of communication with HLR HSS. The first one is your attached request, this authentication request, and the other one is your update location. So in your update location, basically it sends the basically SDSN IP address and the VLR number, TT as well from CS location update. So if a user is latched, you can identify that okay, your user is latched to which operator. So from VLR GT number, you can identify which operator is this, or you can search the SDSN IP address from the internet to check which operator this. This is one of the website which can help you identify from the IP address that which operator is this user being latched into. Similarly, if you have your MNC and MCC available, like if a user is 4G attached, so his EPC realm name is going to be updated in your HSS, and that EPC realm name consists of your MNC and MCC. So based on those MNC and MCC, you can also identify that which operator is your user currently latched into. And this is one of the links where you can identify that which operator is the user being latched to. Right? So once if a user is getting latched, or maybe user is performing location update on the specific operator is not getting latched, so the first thing you need to check is the roaming agreement details. one country may have multiple operators, and your operator may have roaming agreement with selected operators. It may not have a roaming agreement with all the operators. So you need to ensure that your user who is outbound roaming needs to be latched to that specific operator on which you have with which you have roaming agreement. So usually your marketing teams have the roaming agreement sheet, and you can request the updated sheet or get it from some third part to check with which operator you have the roaming agreement with. And within those operators, you also have a preferred partner as well. So you can also consider this steering sheet and see that which partner is preferred, because uh, usually what we are doing is that if there is a preferred partner, so we steer the traffic towards that partner, and the other operator the traffic is steered away from. So you can recommend your user your roaming customer to attach to that specific operator with which we have preferred partnership. Right. The other thing that you need to check is the provisioned APN. Okay. So from HRR HSS, you need to check which APN is assigned to your user. In many cases, what I've observed is that operators have numerous APNs. However, for roaming, you have some selected APNs. So if a user is in your country, he is locally using, you may have APN correction defined in your SDSN. So user may be bringing in some random APN like ABCD, and that gets corrected to a valid APN, a default APN, and his data services work. So once he goes on to roaming, he doesn't correct his APN. They would have that same random APN, or maybe he has some corporate APN, or he has some other APN which is not a part of your roaming agreement. So that APN needs to be changed in the SLR as well, HSS, and on the handset as well. So you need to correlate the assigned APN in the HLR HSS with the IR21 and get it corrected if needed. If the APN and HLR HSS is not the one which is part of your IR21, so you need to get that profile corrected. And the other thing is to get the APN corrected in the handset as well. Like I mentioned, a user may have a wrong APN configured, and in SDSN and MME we have APN correction available, but that APN correction will not work in the visitor SDSN, because visitor SDSN MME does not have the list of all the APNs. So it is going to send the same APN as it is to our HSS, and HSS is going to find that, okay, this APN is not available in my profile, so HSS is going to reject that request. So we need to ensure that the APN configured in the handset should match the APN which is configured in your HSS SLR profile, which should match the APN which is part of your IR21 agreement. So if all three APNs are matched, then there are less chances of your attached request getting failed when your roaming complaints to be observed, right? And how to check the APN provision in handset? Either you can, if the customer has the information, he knows how to check his APN, so you can coordinate with him to check this. If not, then you can check on the SmartCare records or the Bix portal, to check that if a user is sending an attached request, then that attached request has the APN in it. So you can check that which APN the user is bringing and compare it with the HRRS APN and the IR21, and you can identify that, okay, it's the correct APN or not. Okay. Checking the barring on HLR and HSS. So that is something that you need to give me a minute. Right. So the next part is to check the barring on HLR and HSS. Usually, data barring is applied by default for your roaming services. So if the user goes out on roaming, they usually do not get their roaming unbarred, and that is one of the causes of receiving a complaint for roaming. So specifically check for any operator determined barring. There are many places on HRSS where barring may be applied. You may have barring on roaming. You may have barring of GPRS. You may have barring of packet-oriented services, and you have roaming subscription information which is barred. So based on which um, vendor HRSS you have, you can correlate that, okay, which sort of barring is applied, and need to get all those barrings removed if you find any such barring. And consider it to be a good practice. It's a good practice to, if you receive such a roaming complaint, so you can just, apart from your checks, you can engage your HR and HSS team and just ask them to quickly check if all the parameters are correct for the roaming of a may be well equipped to identify any such barring or any such mismatch of the configuration which may cause any issue in a user roaming services. Okay, the next thing is to check the records on iBix portal. Bix Helgacom is basically the GRX provider. Majority of the operators are taking services from them, and they provide you with a portal and the username password to check the user record. So you can log in into the MyBix portal. From the portal, you can go to Smart Web Vision. Here you have three types of different uh, sub portals available. SS7 is used for 3G, 2G, 3G signaling plane. LTE is used for 4G signaling plane, and data is used for 2G, 3G, 4G user plane. So you start off by checking the signaling plane records and see if you find any failures over there. And if there are any failures, then you can open up and it basically opens up a whole complete trace. If you can click on that specific record, so it is going to open a complete trace. It is going to say that from which node the request initiated and which node is returning the failure. And if you open up the trace messages value, you can identify the which sort of failure is being received by which node. To start off with SS7, then you can do with LTE for 4G signaling. And if both of these are giving successful results, then you can check the data usage of user using the data tab. So Bix portal usually helps out in identifying if there is any steering available, if there is any barring available, or if there is any issue in the HSS. So Bix portal record are quite useful and helpful in identifying such issues. The other thing is to check the SmartCare record if you have SmartCare or an equivalent network element installed. So you can go to the PS single interface record, and here there are different interfaces available. So you can click on GR to check the attach and authentication. You can check the S6A tab for 4G attach and authentication. You can check your GNGP for 2G, 3G roaming, and you can check your S5SA tab for 4G. You can query the MSRDN and check where the failure stays, and then accordingly the cause code can be troubleshooted based on what sort of failure you are setting. So SmartCare records and your Bix record are usually similar. Record you can use either of this portal in order to identify what is the exact issue that is going on with your outbound group. This thing again emphasizing that the APN that is configured in a handset needs to be matched with the APN that is in your HLR and HLR, because majority of the time the complaint receives is that either the correct APN is not there on SSS HLR or correct APN is not there on the handset. So there is a difference between the two. Even if both APNs are correct, if there is a difference between the two, the roaming will not work. So you need to engage the local team and you need to ask the customer to configure the correct APN. Okay. And in case the APN is correctly identified, in that case you need to ensure that the APN is also removed from cache. So what happens is that if a user is attached with one specific APN, and that user is basically that user APN and its routing of that APN is stored in the adjacent and the MME cache. So even if user brings in a new APN, his old APN exists, and the routing accordingly to the same old APN is going to be done. So once you do the correction of the APN on HLR and HSS and handset, just ask your RP to which your user is getting that. You ask him to remove his contacts. Or the other thing which you can do is you can ask your local HLR and HSS team to send a cancel request. If they send a cancel request, then his information is going to be purged from the respective SDSN and MME as well, and the cached information is also going to be purged. So the next request that is going to be done is going to be a fresh record, and all the routing and all the information is going to be updated. Right. So if you are not able to identify any such issue, or maybe you're not getting any request on Bix portal and SmartCare, which means that the user request is not getting through from the RP, SDSN, and MME. So you can engage your RP with their on the specific email addresses. Those email addresses you can get from the IR21 document, and the IR21 documents, apart from other portal, it is updated on this portal as well. So it's an IR21 portal where the IR21 is updated for all different operators. So you can get the information, the email addresses, and you can send them an email with your user a message in an engine, ask them to check why the user request is not getting passed through from SDSN and MME. And you can refer to the website. You may ask the RP for the subscribed APN and MME, and you may ask them to purge the user and MME if required. Right. Next, I'm going to introduce how to perform some APN resolution using different DNS servers. Right. So frequently we may need to do the APN resolution from DNS. And based on my experience, there are a few tricks which you can do in order to check the connectivity and check whether your request is passing through to the RP DNS or not. So one thing which you can do is you can resolve an RP APN using local DNS. So this is going to ensure that your local DNS can easily communicate with the root DNS and the RP DNS. You can resolve the RP APN using RP DNS. You can resolve your local APN using RP DNS. It's a reverse hookup, so you can go to the RP DNS and ask them to resolve your APN, and that APN, and then they are going to engage their root DNS and your local DNS. And then you can resolve the RP APN using root DNS. Slight correction here, this is going to be RP APN, and this is going to be local APN. Right. So if you're doing it using a local DNS, so local DNS, the command is usually, the IP is usually 127.0.1. The command is dig or /opd/DNS/dig @, then you mention the DNS IP address, and then -t a, and then you mention the APN. So this is an example. If you want to resolve a do APN do, is you need to ensure that this whole command is executed, and here you need to ensure that the APN should consist of both the network identifier and the operator identifier as well. So this is the APN, and then this is MNC and MCC.GPR for the network identifier, the operator identifier as well. Right, and the successful output will give you the RP GGSN IP, the RP DNS name, and the RP DNS IP address. Right. Next, what we can do is we can using RP DNS to resolve our local APN. Okay, so you can dig at the rate of the RP DNS IP address, and APN name should be complete, and the local APN name. This way you can check the functionality of your RP DNS as well as test the reachability of our DNS to the RP DNS. And successful is going to give you a local GGSN IP, the local DNS name, and the local DNS IP. If you're going to resolve an RP DNS using RP APN using RP DNS, so this is going to be the command. And this again is going to give you the RP GGSN IP, the DNS name as the DNS. This one is to check your resolution of your APN using root DNS. So your root DNS IP you can get from your DNS. If you have your GNDNS, you will have the root DNS IP available. So you can add that IP over here and try to resolve any APN. So this way you can check the functionality of the root DNS as well as test the reachability of DNS to root DNS. The successful output will give you the RP DNS name only and the RP DNS IPs only. It should not give the GGSN IP, because as we discussed earlier, the root DNS only has the DNS name, the SQDN, and the corresponding IPs. The GGSN IP is actually given by the respective DNS IP. So root DNS will give you the DNS IP, and then your DNS is going to coordinate with the RP DNS, and RP DNS is then going to resolve the GGSN IP. So here only two things are good. Right. So this completes the troubleshooting session for international roaming. I hope after this session you will be better equipped to handle the the inbound roaming complaints and the outbound roaming complaints. So till next time, have a nice day and thank you all.